So when you're giving a speech, it's important to, when you're giving a speech, the speech that you don't want to share with people is the one that you're actually supposed to give. And earlier today, I gave a talk at a gym that I'm very disappointed in. And the reason why is because I feel like I've been kind of holding out. I'm on the ballot in 2 states, and yet I'm still not really telling my story. The truth of the reason why I'm running for office, running for president, is because I believe that we've been hijacked. Yes, I want to restore liberty in America, but I believe that America has been hijacked. And the only way that we are going to be able to get our country back is by paying attention to what we don't see in front of us. We're going to pull the curtain back. But it's not so much a matter of, just looking around and seeing fake news, or the fact that corporations now control our elections, or that the courts are stacked. The courts are stacked with extreme justices. It's more than that. I had my own personal experience dealing with authoritarian America as well. For about 7 years, I dealt with unconstitutional government entrapment. It started when I was in the Marine Corps, and I was older. I commissioned when I was 30 years old. It wasn't easy. I had my habits already, and readjusting and molding myself to the Corps was not an easy thing to do. The first deployment was pretty rough. I learned a lot of things. Second deployment went a lot better. First one was to Asia. Second was to Africa. Second deployment went a lot better. I was doing really well, working well with the team. We were leading the logistical support and everything else. And it went so well they gave me my own team to take on board a ship to circumnavigate Africa. And they gave me a gunnery sergeant who was trouble in the unit. And I kind of felt like they were trying to end his career, trying to get me to catch him to do something to end his career. Ultimately, we were on board a Navy vessel, and none of us were allowed to drink, and except everyone else was on the ship was drinking. And ultimately, at some point, Gunny authorized alcohol and wanted to test me. And I wrote him up and did all the things, but I didn't report it to my chain of command. And I ultimately went along with it. And it wasn't the right decision, because it turns out that one of my Marines was a suicidal alcoholic. And he drank and attempted to mix it with sleeping pills and nearly killed himself. And this happened on my watch. I didn't take that lightly. I felt like, your basic job as an officer is to report every violation of order that you're instructed to enforce, and then to enforce the orders that you're given. And it can't get much simpler than that. And the order was, don't drink, don't allow drinking. And we got away from the flagpole. I ultimately authorized it, and I almost lost one of my Marines for it. As a result, I felt like I wanted to take myself out of uniform as quickly as possible. And I went back to when I called up my chain of command. As soon as I realized what had happened, that I almost lost a Marine, said, "Hey, we messed up." I owned responsibility. I explained the whole situation. They took both the gunny and myself gunning me off the ship. And we went back to Italy to explain what happened. I complicated matters by taking a phone into a top secret room to get myself out of uniform. I knew that would do the trick. I deleted everything on my profile, and in order to make sure I had no access to any information that was important, but so that I wouldn't be a danger. But I would also get myself out of the Marine Corps, because I felt like I deserved to be fired at that point. So, there's a chain of command, and there's a reason why rules are in place, and I did not follow I didn't follow the rules the first time or the second time. And as a result, I made things worse. And for the next 7 years, then they expeditiously processed me out of the Marine Corps. I was discharged honorably, but I did receive a code that suggested that it was for national security reasons. And so for the next 7 years, I dealt with unconstitutional governmental entrapment. I was waiting for them to give me a charge, a warrant or something, so that we could settle this in court. I knew I was probably going to have to face something. That never came. Instead, what did happen was men dressed in men in black suits, in black vans outside my house, ostensibly listening to my internet or my phone or whatever. And then I ended up putting an ad on Craigslist for roommates, and I ended up getting roommates who were undercover, and obviously so. One roommate was an Air Force veteran, or claimed to be a veteran. She also had undercover or a top secret clearance, and she propositioned me with sex, and then talked about 9/11 being an inside job, which I believe. I mean, I think the evidence is very clear that we benefited from that attack, and therefore it's probably likely that we were behind it in some way. So I do believe 9/11 was an inside job. And anyway, it just kept happening for years and years until, a number of years later, I ended up moving to Puerto Rico. I went to business school. I ran for office after the Marine Corps because I needed to change the story. All of my military contacts just dropped out. They no longer communicated with me. So I had spent 4 years in the military, and all of a sudden I didn't have a reference for anything I did. Good luck getting into business school or getting a job without a reference for the last 4 years. It wasn't happening, and as a result, I couldn't get a job. And I was rejected from business school when I had previously been accepted to it. The only way I eventually got into Babson, which is where I went to school, is by not telling anybody that I was applying and not using any military references. And I was able to do that by running for office for State House in order to change the storyline on what I had been doing lately. So the last thing was no longer the military. It was now me running for office. And anyway, when I went there, I was working on Earth Loans, which is a planet-friendly lending and investing platform. And the objective was to undermine oil revenue, because oil revenue is the tool of tyranny, which is driving authoritarianism in America. Oil revenue is what drives the American people to send our troops to war for oil, and then also for opium in Afghanistan, when we should be fighting for freedom instead. And our freedom is not contingent upon defending oil. It's only contingent upon defending liberty. And all of those liberties conveniently are in the manual called the United States Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, and the Bill of Rights. All we have to do is read the manual, and we'd all be better off. As a matter of fact, I would say that it'd be a good idea to make sure that everybody at the elementary to high school this is why I don't like talking about it. So what ended up happening was that I dealt with all sorts of things. Phone not working properly, lures to commit all sorts of felony crimes to put me behind bars, blocked any attempts to get a job, blocked email, and I can prove it in my book. I prove it. The list just kind of went on and on. And when your liberty as an American especially, but anyone in general, since the rights, liberty is inherent. It's in the heart of every person, regardless of nationality. But when your liberty is interfered with, and you're completely surrounded and entrapped, it has an effect on you. And I learned in the process that, I'm not the only one, right? I mean, it's obvious that the black and brown community has been oppressed for years. I mean, decades, right? I mean, especially black community, because they've actually been enslaved. And I look up to them because I look up to them because, here's a community that has its roots in slavery. And yet found a way to persist. And that's not easy. But I also learned that the State Department has an unconstitutional NDA, non-disclosure agreement, which requires that everyone who signs it be enthusiastically supportive of American policy. And on the surface, it sounds innocent. Why wouldn't we be supportive of American policy? But the truth is that policy is different than the Constitution. And when you swear an oath to office like I did as a Marine, and as any of you who served, you're swearing an oath to support and defend the Constitution, because the Constitution is the only thing that protects American rights and American values. It's the only thing that protects America. And when you end up swearing to support American policies instead, which is what the State Department NDA does, it obligates you to lie once you find out that American policy is not what we think it is. If you believe that we've been hijacked, if you believe that we've been lied to, if you believe that the two-party system is not representing the people, if you believe that the news is fake, and I do too, it is, but it's not just on one side of the aisle. It's fake on both sides of the aisle. Both CNN and Fox and everything in between, it's fake. The news is not accurate. There's a reason why these things have happened, and it's because of that NDA. The FISA courts are an unconstitutional court system that was set up in 1978, and it stands for Foreign Intelligence Surveillance. I don't even know. I don't remember the A. Foreign Intelligence Surveillance something. And it authorizes the classified court system to go after anyone they want without issuing a warrant, as is required in our, I believe it's the Sixth Amendment that grants us the right to a speedy trial. Fifth Amendment is the right to due process, which requires a warrant. In 87, the Fairness Doctrine was repealed. And at that moment, news became entertainment. In 1991, we appointed our first Supreme Court, I almost said Extreme Court Justice, which I believe is what they actually ought to be called. But the first Supreme Court Justice in 107 years without a two-thirds majority in the Senate. If you don't have, if you can't get a two-thirds majority in the Senate to vote for you as a justice, Supreme Court or otherwise, you're probably too extreme to serve. And when we set the precedent, when George Bush, actually the first, set the precedent by breaking 107 years of precedent by appointing that Justice Clarence Thomas, actually, that set a bad precedent for more to come. And we've George W. Bush appointed one more, and then President Trump has appointed two, all without a two-thirds majority. It was only Justice Roberts, who's the Supreme Court Justice, who has been appointed by a Republican with a two-thirds majority, and that was a good appointment. In 2001, the Patriot Act. Patriot Act was passed just a month after the planes hit the Twin Towers. A document was published 3 years before. The Project for a New American Century specifically mentioned that in the absence of a new Pearl Harbor, the process of transforming America's military defenses would take a prolonged period of time. And I'm pretty sure I quoted that directly or correctly. So by getting attacked, we were able to go to war with Iraq, who, by the way, had nothing to do with the attacks. The hijackers were Saudi, not Afghan, not Iraqi. So go figure on that one. Why don't we just invade Saudi Arabia? Maybe because of the oil revenue. Anthrax attacks followed the 9/11 hijacking until we eventually passed the Patriot Act. And as a result of the Patriot Act and the National Defense Authorization Acts that follow, the FBI has been able to change the definition of terrorism to anyone with an extreme thought. You don't even have to do anything. And if you want to check this out for yourself, go to FBI.gov /investigate/terrorism, unless they changed the URL. They changed it before. It used to be FBI.gov /terrorism. So they might be changing things. I don't know. Anyway, it says there that anyone doesn't have to do anything, but anyone with an extreme thought can be considered a terrorist. And we all have extreme thoughts, which means every one of us are terrorists, which is exactly what Edward Snowden was talking about when he was warning us about mass surveillance in America. And the government knew that I believed that 9/11 was an inside job. And as a matter of fact, I believe that 9/11 was an inside job since the day that it happened, shortly thereafter, because I studied international relations and political economics at Michigan State. And the definition at the time was different from the definition that we're told now. At the time, the definition had a lot to do with a government conducting an action to terrorize the people for a political purpose. And often the government did it against itself. That was the definition in 2000, before 2001. So, after I went and took my phone into a top secret room, they thought that I was collaborating with the enemy or I was a terrorist or whatever. And for 4 years, when I was trying to raise money for Earth Loans for a planet-friendly lending and investing platform, every time I had an investor on the hook, they would either A, disappear or B, try to get me to launder money or commit blackmail or something that was completely illegal. And all I wanted to do was set up a lending and investing platform to undermine oil revenue, because oil is what's driving evil in America. And I knew I was biting off more than I could chew going after oil. I mean, they control everything. But, I supported an oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And I'll be damned if I sit idly by while they take my Constitution and my rights and the rights of all Americans, so that they can go and destroy the planet and control everyone's lives behind an illegal NDA? I don't think so. So they structured my life to the point where really I had no career. I was able to survive because I can trade. I could trade Forex markets, I could trade the crypto markets, and I had a Beachbody business. It's still bringing in a little bit of money, but not much. I managed to survive, and I eventually wrote a couple of articles, Bitcoin's Dark Secret and Can Terrorists Hack Bitcoin? At the end of 2017, while I was trading $2,500 into $80,000 in 2.5 months. The government didn't believe that I could trade that well. They thought that I was laundering money. And so my overnight wire took 23 days to complete, because the Treasury is tracking every single transaction that we make. And in a country where you have no constitutional rights, that very easily can cause all sorts of problems. And if at some point we go bankrupt, which is what I believe that President Trump is trying to do, he is the king of bankruptcy after all, and Bitcoin has already gained mainstream notoriety, and we now have the largest deficit in American history. And China is no longer buying American debt. And so what that means is that we are more likely to go bankrupt, and go bankrupt very soon. And when that happens, I'm betting that the authoritarians want us to transition to Bitcoin. And the reason why is because Bitcoin, unlike everything you've heard, a blockchain is public, right? And it is transparent. But back in the early days in 2010, and you can read this in my articles on Medium, it's medium.com/@joe.mchugh. And I lay it out step by step exactly what they did to rewrite the blockchain to create 182 billion counterfeit Bitcoin. And if you don't know what that means, It means that the 21 million Bitcoin that are floating, that we currently believe is the limit on Bitcoin, it's only 0.01% of the total float. And so that means that Bitcoin at $10,000 is really worth only 10 cents. But as long as it's $10,000, the government can sell some of their money on the private markets, in the black market, in Venezuela and in Argentina and other countries whose currencies are crashing, like Iran, and we sell it off the market. But if you do that here in the U.S., the FBI will throw you in prison for it. Why do I know this? Because they tried to do it to me, and I'm lucky enough to know the law because I have my investment advisor license. And they know that that's illegal, and I read some articles about it. I was able to, mess with them. And I like to play a game called Torment the Tormentor. They were messing with me. I'm using messing when I usually would use the F word. But as far as I was concerned, they were messing my life up, and I wanted to give them hell because what they were doing was wrong. And I only injured myself. I didn't injure anyone else. Just like all the people that are behind bars for drugs right now, they didn't hurt anybody else. And that's part of the reason why I feel so adamantly that we need to legalize, regulate, and tax cannabis. Get people out of prison, off the pills, off the streets, and back to work. Anyway, after I wrote that Bitcoin article, it was just chaos. I went to Puerto Rico at that point. I published the article even though I exposed a $9 quadrillion fraud. But I did so because I believed I was a dead man anyway. They hadn't issued me a warrant. They were destroying my ability to make any money. They had undercover roommates. They had people interfering with my campaign back in 2014. They were trying to get me to break any law in the book that they can come up with so they can throw me in prison. So I said, the hell with it. I published the article because even though other people said if you do that, they're going to go after you, but I didn't feel like as far as I'm concerned, I was already dead. They'd taken everything from me. So I took the money, and after I sold out and eventually came through, and I went to Puerto Rico, and I wore this shirt, Save the Shire, because I knew, first off, it's one of my two favorite shirts. The other one is Infinite Possibilities. But I knew that there were people out there who were working for the government that maybe, just maybe, I would get lucky enough that they would believe that I was telling the truth. I didn't steal any information from the government. Yes, I believe 9/11 was an inside job because I don't think they're that smart that they can cover their tracks very well. When you study economics, everything is very painfully obvious. And it's a horrible thing that they did to the country, and it's a horrible thing that they've done throughout the years, oppressing people, and now they're oppressing everybody. And we don't even know it, but we're locked behind the two-party system. Anyway, when I got to Puerto Rico, and all of this I write about in my book, by the way, it's hijackingamerica.com. You can check it out. But when I got to Puerto Rico, I met a lot of people that were undercover, but they'll never tell you that, which is the reason why I don't name names in my book. Every name in my book is fake because at some point, if someone is identified, they're going to deny it, and it's going to become a he said, she said, and they got to do that. They're locked behind an NDA. They got to protect their own ass. I don't blame them. I'm trying to protect everyone's ass by breaking down the wall here. And that's the reason why I'm running for president. Because at this point, after dealing with all that entrapment, I was invited eventually to go to Buffalo to launch my business, and they gave me a contract that was missing a clause, a non-dilution clause, which means that for the next 15 years, they would have been able to dilute 100% of my equity stake in the company. I'm not going to work for free. Create a company that's big, that has the potential to be enormous in the biggest market on the planet, climate change and the environment. So I don't get a chance to participate. That's another form of entrapment. I wasn't going to perform. So I ended up pivoting and writing the book, and then, here I am running because I really don't know that there's anything left that I can do besides bring awareness to this issue. And you can't do it within the parties because we all know that the Democratic Party is rigged and the Republican Party is totally hijacked by the authoritarians. The libertarians like me, there's no place for them in the Republican Party. And if you're an environmentalist, also like me, liberty is clean air, clean water, healthy food, These are things that we're not getting in America. America's obese. It's because of our food. It's because of our water. It's because of our habits. The system wants us sick. Anyway, been talking to the camera for a bit. Thank you for listening. That's the real reason why I'm running. That's what I've not been sharing. And I'm now going to work on putting that into a tighter format so that I can share that in a more coherent, manner that's to the point. But I wrote a book, and it talks about a lot of this stuff in depth. But I'm running for president of the United States as an independent because I believe that we've been hijacked by the two-party system and the Federal Reserve, and liberty must strike back. If we work together, we can save the Shire, we can save America. I do love you, America. And I trust that you'll do the right thing. So go to libertystrikesback.com and sign up. We need people across the country to collect petition signatures. If we don't vote out President Trump, he is leading the authoritarian charge at this point. And if we don't vote him out, I'm afraid that what we've got coming is going to be much, much worse. He's running on the economic platform. The Federal Reserve is pumping $60 billion a month right now into the market, just like they did back in 2008. We're bankrupt, and he's leading the charge in the bankruptcy. The unemployment numbers are fake. They're not even publicly verifiable. I'm going to write more articles on this stuff, but we need to team up. We need to work together. We need to fight back against this hijacking. And the only way we're going to do it is by electing an independent. And that's the reason why I'm going the route of the independent. So I expect some backlash if we ever get through and people start paying attention. I'm sure that people are going to attack the message, attack the messenger, whatever. I don't care. I swore an oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and I'll be damned. I will defend this to my death. Give me liberty or give me death. Thanks for listening.